Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Well-Appointed Mystic. Today I'm going to talk about Paulina Fae, also known as Paulina Cassidy, and I have one of her decks. And honestly, if you had told me when I started collecting tarot decks that I would have one, let alone 6 Paulina Fae decks, I would not have believed you, because my initial reaction to her artwork is that it's a little delicate and a little cutesy for me. But that being said, I have come to genuinely appreciate this sort of imagery and styling. So I thought I would use this opportunity to, one, just sort of go over the whole pile, but then also to sort of do a comparison of the 4 Paulina Cassidy tarot decks, just to help if you are considering buying one, figuring out which one might work best for you. So first off, I'm just going to talk about, I picked up the Halloween Dreams playing cards. That was a Kickstarter last year in 2023. And it's just a lovely little sort of Halloween spooky, creepy characters. It's a very, very sweet deck. I really like it. I don't know how I might use it. Maybe I've always wanted to learn to do more sort of playing card based cartomancy. So if I did, I think I would definitely like to sort of play around with this deck a little bit. That's very sweet. But I'm just including this one just for thoroughness. These are the backs of the cards. They are a linen stock, and then she did make these herself, and I believe they shipped probably early 2024. I don't know if she has any in her shop or anything like that. It's just a tuck box. It's just sort of your classic playing card set with individual illustrations on each card. So not really relevant to our current conversation, but I thought I would share them in case you too are a Paulina Fae completionist. And then the other deck that's sort of not really relevant to our conversation today, but that I wanted to include, was the Witchlings, which is more of a spell, like oracle spell deck. And so the guidebook includes, for each card, it includes, like, each of the characters on the cards is given a name. So like, we'll find meditation. So it has like a little poem. It has information about what meditation can bring. There's a descriptor at the bottom. And then there are several like spells or rituals or activities that you can do in relationship to meditation. So like an energy clearing, water, tree root, bubble of protection. So for each of the cards. So I have enjoyed using this much more than I thought I was going to. I thought, again, her artwork hits at a certain spot where it is kind of, these particularly look much more youthful, not like adults so much as like somewhere between children and sort of fairy-esque creatures. But all of the messaging and the associated spells are really good. And so it kind of taps into those moments in your life when you might need something that gives you a little bit of strength and a little bit of courage and a little bit of confidence, and the combining it with the opportunity of doing some of these activities or spells to sort of further the potential energy. So if you pulled the Patience card, there's a little spell for give it time that is a wind-up clock, a candle, and an incense lighting a stick of incense. And then it just talks, through sort of a meditative process and a little ritual of helping you find patience. So I just feel like these are really, it's just a good little activity spell deck, and I really like it. This one was also from US Games. The card deck was independently produced. Everything else, I believe, comes through US Games. So I think all 4 of the remaining decks that I have to discuss. So at some point when I was planning out this video, I had these in order as to like when they were produced, and I think the way that it works is it was the Paulina, then the Joie de Vivre, then I have to double check. I think there are dates on here. The Spirit Song deck came out in 2017, and Phantasma came out in 2021. So yes, they are actually in order from oldest to newest. And there's a little bit where you can see I believe I bought the Paulina deck secondhand, and it was in a ratty box. So that's why it has its own. It's also my favorite, and I'll just get that out of the way right now. The Paulina deck, the first one, is my favorite, and that's why it has its own very special case. The Joie de Vivre I also got secondhand because I was curious to see the difference between the two, and then that led me to picking up the other 2 as well, for the same reason. Like, as I keep adding them, I was like, so what makes this one different from this one? So that's what we're gonna do next. So we're gonna wave our magic wands, and we'll get these all unwrapped for you. Voila, they're all unwrapped. So the Paulina and the Joie de Vivre both came in tuck boxes with just little white books, and by the time the Spirit Song and the Phantasma were produced, they have larger guidebooks, complete, like perfect bound with nice covers, and they're still black and white on the inside, but they're larger text, more information. These books, don't discount them just because they have little white books. The information in these is excellent. It's very detailed. They didn't waste space here with fancy graphics or pictures of the cards. It is the keywords, a description, and a reversed meaning. They're short and to the point, but they're very accurate, and they do go in, like in the case of the Joie de Vivre, they go into describing some of the details in the imagery, and the Paulina as well has more information. And again, these are short little descriptions, but they're very effective. So despite their size, don't dismiss them just because they have tiny little white books. They're really good books. Then the Spirit Song, the biggest difference with Spirit Song is that it's all animal based. So for each card, there is an animal on the card and an association based on that animal. The other thing to note about the Spirit Song is that all of the suits, the names have changed, which is like, plus I really like the idea of an animal deck. Downside for me is changing all of the names of the suits. I think there's a description in the front just because I can't remember off the top of my head. But let's see. Like the minor arcana, here it is. There's acorns, shells, feathers, and crystals. I suppose it's not that hard for me to remember those, but I think because they do acorns and shells, and in my head acorns, I go to the Oak, Ash, and Thorn, where they use the acorns for the cups, and so I have a bit of a transitional issue. Here they use acorns to indicate like fire and wands. So anyway, just something to be aware of. Feathers is air, so swords, something like that. So anyway, there's just a little bit of a learning curve if you're real familiar with the RWS and that kind of thing, there's a bit of a learning curve. So anyway, so those are the guidebooks. We're just going to toss those all up here. And then these are the backs. So with the exception of the Joie de Vivre, they're all very muted and pastel, like very simple colors. So I feel like I'm gonna have to move some stuff out of the way to get all this stuff in here. I did not plan well for this. And the card size, while the Paulina and Joie de Vivre are sort of your standard tarot size, the Spirit Song and Phantasma tarot are both about 1/4 of an inch or so larger. So also cardstocks are a little bit different. These are classic US Games cardstock. These are the newer, more papery cardstock. These feel more like playing cards. So, all right, we're gonna turn these over because you'll be impressed to know I put them all in order before I started this video. We don't have to go through the whole, all 78 cards, but I thought just being able to show sort of the visual differences of each of these would be helpful. So again, talking about the Spirit Song being probably the most different, these other two are more similar. I think the Phantasma has more creatures, where the Paulina and Joie de Vivre have more sort of human-like fae type characters, and then the Spirit Song is most specifically animals. Some of the actual card names have been changed, but it does include keywords. So like on the upside, the Spirit Song is great for some because it does include keywords. So the fact that they've changed so many things about this deck, the one thing that they did to sort of provide a little helping hand is to actually include the keywords. So again, looking at these two cards for the Fool, really the biggest difference, I think, is just in the brightness of the colors. This one is a little bit more simplified. These have all these trees in the background, and the color is a little bit more vibrant. This one is more of a character creature, and then obviously this one is an animal, and I am not going to pretend that I know all of the animals here, but I think this is probably an antelope. The specific reason for that I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. So anyway, so we'll just work our way through these. So again, in the Paulina, another more human figure, where the Joie de Vivre is more of a creature, sort of a cat-ish, cat-like, not monster, but you get where I'm going. And then with the Phantasma, again, more of a creature. So, and the biggest thing I think is like these two are very comparable, I think, to a certain extent, because there are more animals front and center. I'm gonna be a graphic designer here for a minute and say that just looking at the type treatments on all of these, I prefer the type on the Paulina and on the Phantasma over the two in the middle. It's just a personal preference. I don't mind the little details around the edge, but these cards are particularly big, and I think had they handled it in a more legible typeface way, the cards wouldn't have had to be so big. But that's just me. But anyway, okay, designer moment over. But yeah, so again, these two, there's quite a similarity in the figures. There's just more simplicity to this one and more complexity here. But honestly, I love the complexity in these. They do require a little bit more. They make me slow down, I think, as the Paulina makes me slow down and really look at the details in the cards. There's like these, you know, these bees down here. There's eyes in there. Like, there's just lots of these little details that I get very wrapped up in, which I wasn't ever expecting. So, So moving into the Empress, I always like the use of a rabbit with the Empress and the Queen of Pentacles. It's just kind of how my brain works. But there's, I mean, this all comes down to a choice in the artwork and what kinds of energy you want to work with. More animal-based, more human, fae kind of vibe. In this one, I feel like the Emperor feels like he has more gravitas. This feels more playful, almost like something from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of a vibe. Maybe it's just me. But this almost looks like, it's sort of a cyber creature with wings and everything. So there's lots to look at in her cards, and I'm surprised at how much I ended up enjoying sort of sinking into her artwork, because my initial reaction was that her art was not for me. It just wasn't something that immediately appealed to me, but the more that I've worked with it, the more I enjoy it, and the more depth and interest that I see. Her artwork, her style is very consistent, which is also helpful. Sometimes you look at cards and you're like, oh, I really like that one, and then you look at another one and you think, did they phone the artwork in on that one? I'm not naming names. I'm not just putting it out there. Like, sometimes I look at them and I'm like, this looks like somebody had created the artwork and then they told them, okay, now you have to do 56 more cards, and they kind of had to hoof it. So, but there's like a real consistency throughout the entire deck. I think she definitely puts her time and energy into creating the artwork for each one of these. So, all of these lovers cards are amazing. Like, I love them all, and they definitely lean more toward the romantic side of the Lovers card than the Choice, but I do feel some of that, like this sort of choosing to go on this journey together. This one has a very similar vibe. There's always the like creature with the letter in like 3 out of 4 of these, and then the wolves like choosing to run with your pack. It's kind of cool. I swore I wasn't going to go one by one through all 78 cards, so y'all hold me to it. We'll start moving through these a little faster so you don't get bored. But the Chariot with the unicorns, the seahorses. I like that the Rhino is he's his own unicorn. So, just really, my feeling about Paulina's decks is that it is very much a personal choice. I know tons and tons of people really favor the Joie de Vivre. That is their favorite. For me, it's the Paulina. That one is my favorite. But the longer that I have these other decks, the more that I warm up to them and see why people like them so much. So, this octopus is amazing. So there's just some really cool little elements and things. So it's definitely worth considering these. And because they're all mass market decks, they all come from US Games, it's not hard to find them either on sale or at a decent price because they are mass market, or heck, even on the secondhand market. I found 2 out of these 4 decks secondhand. So they're definitely worth considering. And my feeling is that a lot of people don't often consider these decks, maybe because they are very busy, maybe because some of the art is a little odd. But the praying mantis is the hangman. So I just think there's a lot of potential here. The cicada for death. Like, I live in a place where there are a lot of cicadas this year, and that, we have the little cicada shells already popping up. So it's like, what a great representation for death. And it's very, very appealing. Going to the light. So Yeah, so these are, I mean, what's your feeling? Do you have any of Paulina's decks? Have you considered buying any of them? Which ones would you be most inclined to get? Or is there one that you really, like, genuinely dislike? Like, this is, I mean, like, this devil is really interesting, like, treating the figure like a puppet, and he's the puppet master kind of thing, I think is a really great representation. So, here, the devil is listed as the shadow, so I would have to dig into the guidebook a little bit more to sort of get their interpretation here. They list self-empowerment and ambition, so I think they've definitely taken a softer angle with that, and here it's listed as the djinn, which I think is kind of cool, because that's thinking about, like, you know, you've got 3 wishes, what are you gonna wish for, you know, like, be careful what you wish for type of a vibe. So, tower. Is that a gecko? So don't they shed their skin? So there's sort of giving up, again, another case of sort of giving up to move forward. So I think all of these star cards are amazing. I think these are the ones I like the most. I love the swan in the, you know, with the star reflection in the water. So, and I mean, like, some of these, like, this is almost exactly the same pose. It has the owls. Definitely, I get the feeling that she's taken her artwork and has taken different directions with it. This feels sweeter and more fae. This feels a little darker. She's got her box with the triple moon goddess, almost like what's her name, who let all the stuff out of the box in the Greek mythology. Someone help me out here. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway, yeah, so this is the sun. Again, these all feel very similar but different. This is definitely more of a classic RWS interpretation, and then they get more sort of exotic and unusual as you go along. This one is very fairy-like on the back of a fairy frog. So, and then for judgment on 2 of these, they're listed as awakening, which I think is nice. It sort of takes a little bit of the more specifically Christian overtones out, the biblical references. And then the world, and in this case my favorite is the dragon. It's just a delight, but the whale is really cool too. Actually, I really like all of these world cards. So, okay, so now we're getting into the suits, and I actually had to rearrange. Some of these decks were still in order. I think I had rearranged them. So these may not be the order in which they appear in the book, but I wanted them all to be consistent. So we were comparing pentacles to crystals to coins, you know how that works. But so this points out that on 2 of these decks, they're labeled as the pentacles. We have one that's labeled as the coins, and then one that's labeled as the crystals, which I guess crystals feel very earthy, so I think that works. It's not a huge mental jump for me. But yeah, so there's a little balancing here. I'd be curious how, I guess kangaroos balance on those little legs and their tail, so I can see where that works. The 3 of Pentacles. I'd be interested to find more out about the bumblebee and how that relates. But I love the bats. So we have the 4. Is that a beaver? The 5. So lady, this is a beautiful illustration of a ladybug and the crystals and the details. Her artwork really is stunning, and the longer you look at it, I think the more intrigued and enticed you can get. This one I think is probably one of my favorites. It's sort of like the little creature trying very hard to get somewhere. But yeah, so I feel like some of these, it's a quicker read to sort of an RWS meaning. Without the keywords on the spirit song, I think I would have a hard time getting where, I think these are meerkats, don't hold me to it, like what they had to do with gratitude. I'm just not that knowledgeable about that particular animal. So I feel like for most people there would be a moment at which they would get a little tripped up if you are not very knowledgeable on sort of the associations of animals to sort of the spirit world and stuff. So like some of these would be harder to use for a newbie. Others would be easier. Like I do feel like these are probably easier to use and get closer to the original RWS meanings. This one kind of fluctuates. Some are easier to read than others, so definitely like going back to the guidebook would be advantageous at some level. I mean, this one is, you know, sort of your classic painting the pentacles for an 8 of Pentacles, which is not, you know, a big stretch. But this one of the cat sort of conjuring the, like, I'm not sure how, you know, like if I didn't already have a understanding or meaning for the 8 of Pentacles, I'm not sure that I would have to go to the guidebook and see what the interpretation was. But they're beautiful. Like my problem is that, and I can't seem to say, oh, I only need one of these decks, because I start to flip through these cards and I'm like, oh, these are so pretty. I mean, I love these 2 tigers with their tails intertwined for the 10 of Pentacles. It's just like a delight. So then we get into the court cards. I suppose it helps if I actually put them in order. So on all of these, they are listed as pages, knights, queens, and kings. So there is a little less, like there isn't a further complication in like sort of learning your suits and what everything is supposed to be. So the bunny and the Queen of Pentacles. And the king. So now we're on to the swords, or in the case of the spirit song, this is the feathers. So my little piles are getting really messy, I apologize. I do feel like while the majors for the Phantasma have more creatures, there are more human-like figures in the minors. And maybe that makes sense. The majors are your spirit creatures. The minors, which are more mundane, have more humans. The bear for the 4 of Swords, I think, is a good little hibernating, little taking a nap. This fives I have this one's probably the closest to an RWS interpretation. So we have the 6. I mean, I feel personally inclined to maybe use the spirit song for a card a day, because then I could refer to the guidebook for the single card pull and just sort of learn more about each of the cards. And what the animal association is, and I feel like that would really give me more information. Because looking at the cards, if it weren't for the keywords, in a lot of cases, I'm not entirely sure I would guess what they were. But yeah, so a little thievery going on. I think these are amazing. Such great illustrations for the 8. These are very, very similar. This one, to me, is much scarier, but that's just me. We have the 10. It's interesting that they have recovery and transformation. That's not always the keywords that I associate with the 10 of Swords. Do you think raccoons with discovery and exploration? I don't know. I guess so. They discover trash and they explore your trash cans. So then we have the Knights. The Queen. She is probably like one of my favorite cards in all of these decks. She's just perfectly ornery. We have the Kings. And then now we're in the Wands, or in the case of the Spirit Song, the Acorns. I really like this one, the Winged Lion. I think I also really like this one too. It definitely has that feeling of like looking out onto the horizon and sort of moving on to taking those first steps. So these are the 4s. Oof. Ready to fight. I do like this one. Sixes. We're getting through these piles pretty quick now. So this, I really like this 7 of Wands. It really helped me, I think, when I was early in my studies, getting a better understanding of the, like, because for me, like the 5 and 7 of Swords and the 5 of 7 of Wands, oftentimes looking at the card, it's hard to tell which one is the one that's sort of holding your ground versus, you know, so it's like when I look at this one, I get a real clear sort of like taking the higher ground kind of vibe to it, which I think is cool. So interesting interpretations. Like this feels very classic Rider-Waite for the 8. These feel like very different interpretations. So in the case of the 9s, these 3 feel real consistent. And that Panther Man, I wouldn't mess around with him. And then we get to the 10s. So we have the Pages. And I'm gonna move these piles out of the way and make new piles because these have gotten so tall they're getting a little challenging. Get those out of the way. Then we have the Knights of Wands. A wild boar. That seems right on. And the Queens. She's great. And the Kings. And then we're into the Cups, which in Spirit Song are called shells, which I feel like is a pretty good, like, if you're going to change them and make them feel more animal related, that seems like a good way to go. It does definitely make me think of water. So this one's probably the most classic with the overflowing bowl. Wow, it's a great, but I'm a sucker for pigeons. I like them. But, and look at these wonderful creatures. So, flamingo is one of my spirit animals. Flamingos can stand in like very acidic, like volcanic water. So they might look goofy and whatever, but like they're tough as nails. I heard some story like on a podcast where they were talking about flamingos and you know, like why there are no like major sports teams called the Flamingos, despite the fact that they're really tough and can, you know, withstand, you know, boiling water, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And but people think that they're, you know, too feminine or sweet because they're pink. Like, I don't know. They got those big beaks. They look kind of, they can hold their own. So then for the Four of Cups, sorry, I got on a tangent. So we got the Four of Cups. The Five, like the sort of the wilted flowers on that one. That's really good. Six. I kind of like this. Feels more like that, the idea that you're sort of like getting back in touch with like your childhood imaginary friend or something, you know, your snuffleupagus, as opposed to sort of like that sort of classic image, like the kid with the flowers kind of thing. I think that's kind of a cool interpretation. At least that's how I'm reading the card. You might feel differently. The 8. Kind of a fun way to do that. It's curious. Little creatures around her. We've got 10. For as sweet and pastel colored and everything that Paulina is in general, for the 10 of Cups, there is an absence of rainbows. I'm impressed. I mean, there's a little bit of rainbow coloring here, but like for the most part, she's stayed away from sort of the classic 10 of Cups rainbow thing. Like this tree and just very interesting versions of these cards. Then we have the pages. And then the knights. This is one of my favorites. He looks like he's definitely headed somewhere interesting. We have our queens. And our very last cards, the King of Cups. So those are the 4 Paulina Tarot. She hand drew all of these. I mean, I know I've heard a lot of people recently talking about issues with, you know, decks being AI related and stuff like that. So being able to know for absolute certainty that Paulina drew every single one of these images, nothing is AI. I do think one of the things I was curious, I thought these were color coded by suit, but they are not. They're sort of like the edges just sort of go along with the artwork, which I think is a little surprising. I was kind of hoping that they would be more color coded in their pastels, but it's kind of all over the map for the Spirit Song. So yeah, so these are, you know, maybe I could get them in frame for you guys. What do you think? Let's squidge these over. So these are each of the decks. We have the Paulina, the Joie de Vivre, the Spirit Song, and the Phantasma. So I just wanted to share all of these with you all and give you a chance to sort of see them all together. I do know that there's been some rumors that she's doing one more tarot deck and then she's not doing any more tarot. And honestly, I can't say that I blame her. I feel like doing 4 full 78 card decks over what's essentially about 20 years is a lot of work, but feeling like you have said what you want to say through tarot, through these cards. But yeah, please let me know if you have a favorite Paulina deck, if you've ever used any, or if you are considering purchasing any of these after seeing this video. So thank you so much for your time. I look forward to talking to you again.